Hello everyone and welcome to Life Begins in 20. My name is Mark and today we have the fourth video in our series of cubed updates where we're going to be taking a look at all of the red cards. Now, as I've already mentioned before in the previous videos, there's been over 300 changes to my cube, and that is absolutely incredible. The difference with how the cube is playing is like night and day in comparison, and to be honest, I'm a little bit embarrassed about the initial cube I had, but that's the beauty of this format, is the fact that it's ever growing, it's ever changing, and you can do what you like to it, and that is absolutely incredible. And I can't thank you all enough for all the suggestions that you've given me from my previous videos, because those changes and those suggestions have really helped to improve how my cube is playing. So thank you all so much. And without any further ado, let's get stuck in. So starting off with the Planeswalkers here in red, and we have 4 of them here, and each one of them serves a slightly different purpose. So starting off with, we're going to go with my favourite of all the Planeswalkers here, which Chandra Tortured Defiance. I just absolutely love this card. It's so good for a whole manner of reasons. I mean, you've got a bit of card draw there, or it's going to be dealing some damage to your opponent. You can got mana ramp as well, which is something, you know, a little bit different on a Planeswalker there. Her -3, it's got a little bit of removal. To be honest, it's not even really going to be used all that much, and the -7 is absolutely incredible and will end games very quickly. But I just absolutely love the versatility this Planeswalker gives me. It's just so good. Next up, we've got a cube favourite here in the form of Koth of the Hammer. Again, we're going to try and get the foiling shown up there. This guy is just a brute, and I really do like it for that. So again, in a more aggro style deck here, +1, giving yourself a 4/4 elemental creature with haste, you know, just swinging in with that would be fantastic. -2 is just going to give yourself some severe ramp to really push yourself up as well. And -5, which is very achievable. You know, you can tap mountains for extra damage as well, and that's just really nice to have. Next up, we've got Doretti Scrap Savant. So this is more for the artifact style thing going on. I really need to push my artifacts a little bit more than I've got at the moment, but it's still pretty useful Planeswalker there. So the +2, discard 2 cards, draw that many. Again, is always going to be useful, even for just filling up the graveyard as well. Sacrifice an artifact and then return artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield is, again, it's another nice way of getting, say, the Battle Ball or Sundering Titan onto the play for really cheap cost. It's just another way of getting, you know, another Tinker style spell going on there. And the -10, which to be perfectly honest is, it never happens. I don't think I've ever seen his -10 ever come off. It's, you know, pretty useful. It's still really nice, but to be honest, you know, the card draw and the mini Tinker there's also why he is in the cube. And last up we have Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker. Now, I like this card. I've got this card along with Glorybringer in my cube, and they both pretty much do near enough the same thing together. So again, you know, he can +1 into a 4/4 dragon. Again, really useful. Indestructible and haste, great. Swinging in, do some nice damage there. His -3 deals 4 damage to target creature, so it's like exerting the Glorybringer. Plus it's -6. You get an emblem at the beginning of your draw step, draw 2 additional cards, and then discard your hand at the end of the. So again, that's achievable with this card for sure. It's probably a little bit, you know, a little bit more consistent at dealing the damage than Glorybringer, but they are both one of the same. So if I ever end up getting, say, Thundermaw Hellkite, for example, I may end up having to take one of them out. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not actually sure which one I would, because Glorybringer is doing some really seriously good work. So moving on to the 1-drops, and I'm so glad to have opened this up in Modern Masters 2017. I mean, Goblin Guide is just fantastic, as I'm sure many of you are already aware. This card does some really seriously good work. 2/2 with haste for 1 with a little bit of a downside. Again, you're not going to have too many problems having that there. Next up, we've got, again, another 2/2 for 1 here with Zergo Spellspike Striker, and he can't block creatures with power 2 or greater, which again is fine. I don't have an issue doing that. Plus he's got a little bit of a dash cost if you want to swing in on the turn and then goes back to your hand. So again, another nice 2/2 for 1. And then we've got the 2 1s for 1 going on now. So you got Falconwrath Gorger, Jackal Pup, and Firedrinker Satyr. To be honest, the Vampire Madness section of the Falconwrath Gorger is something that, you know, you completely ignore for the most part. There are a few vampires in the cube for sure, but I'm not supporting it anywhere near enough for it to really matter. And then Jackal Pup and Fire Drinker Satyr, again, whenever they get dealt damage, it comes to you, which is a little bit of a downside there, but Fire Drinker Satyr he can pump himself up as well and do some even more damage if they can get through, so that's always nice to have. Next up, we've got one of probably the best one drops in red. I mean, Goblin Glide's probably up there as the best one, but this is still fantastic. So a 1/2 with haste with prowess is just fantastic, and you're going to be casting a lot of spells, so this is really nice because it'll fit into a wide variety of red decks there. Another one we've got here is Stromcook Noble. He can't be blocked by humans, which is pretty nice considering the amount of humans that just happen to be in white. It's not a case of you're planned to put make a white human tribal by any stretch of the imagination, but most people's white sections, for example, will just have a lot of humans on there. And whenever he deals combat damage to a player, he gets to grow and grow and grow. Really nice early drop. Frenzied Goblin is the next one up, so it's a 1/1 for 1, but whenever he attacks you can pay 1 red and target creature can't block this turn, which is always useful, especially say for example they've only got 1 blocker available, and you can just go, no, you're not going to be blocking my Stromcook Noble and it can grow, so that's nice. And then we've got a bit more of it's not an aggro 1-drop by any stretch of the imagination. This is definitely useful for later on in the game. Just 1/1 for 1 with Dragon Master Outcast here, and if you control 6 or more lands, so it's probably better off in more of a green red ramp style deck for sure. You get yourself a 5/5 dragon creature token onto the battlefield, and that's every single upkeep, so if you can protect him, you're going to get yourself a really nice board presence there. And then the last card we've got in the 1-drops I've been very, very impressed with is Soulscar Mage. I mean, yes, I wish it did have haste, it would then be better than Monastery Swiftspear, to be perfectly honest, but even without that, a 1/2 with prowess is still pretty decent. It's still decent enough as a beta, but the good part is that it means it just turns all of your burn spells into combat tricks, and that is phenomenal, and that can do some really nice work, and is definitely another way of getting rid of indestructible creatures as well. So yeah, I really do like this card, and it is proving to do some really good work for me. So moving on into the 2-drops, and again we're going to have some aggro-centric cards here as well. I mean, we've got Gorehouse Chainwalker here. It's got some foiling. I'm trying to show that, but either way, it's a 2/1 for 2 with Unleash, so you can enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, and it just can't block. No, I don't have an issue. Because it's just going to be swinging every time. Next up is another new card from Amonkhet. It's a 4/3 for 2 and enters the battlefield. You get to discard a card. Again, I don't have an issue with that. There are going to be some people's cubes for sure that are going to have like madness costs, so you'll be able to pay Fiery Temple or something along the lines afterwards, which is still pretty cool. Or you can be filling up your graveyard, and to be perfectly honest, discarding 1 card that may have excess lands in your hand or something along those lines to get a 4/3 for 2. No issues with that at all. Next we've got Stormblood Berserker, so it's a 1/1 for 2, but it's got Bloodthirst 2, so again, if the opponent was dealt damage this turn, he gets to come on with 2 +1/+1 counters, and to be perfectly honest, I haven't actually seen him not come into play with 2/1 counters on, and he can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, so he has got Menace, even though they haven't really said that on there, so that's, again, it's always useful, but no more often than that as a 3/3 for 2. Next up we've got Hellspark Elemental. Again, this is another foil. It's DCI number showing up quite nicely. We'll just see if that works there. This is just a really, really nice card again. So for 1 and a red, you've got yourself a 3/1 Trample and Haste, so he swings in straight away. End of the turn, you have to sacrifice it, but it's also got an unearth cost as well, so you can come in from the graveyard, which is really nice too. Next up, we've got a card from Aether Revolt that I've been very, very impressed with, and it's not purely down to the fact that you get a legendary monkey token. Honestly, it's not, but that legendary monkey token is amazing. A 1/3 first strike with Menace is just fantastic for 2, and whenever it attacks, you get to create a 2/1 monkey token that is swinging in as well, so that's fantastic. Plus, it's the perfect card to be able to put any sort of equipment on as well. It's just really, really good. I do like that. Next up, we've got Plated Geopede, so it's a 1/1 for 2 with First Strike, again, very useful. Plus, it also then gets +2/+2 whenever a land comes into play as well, so, this could get bigger and bigger, and if you're able to put multiple lands in one turn, which some cases you are doable, especially if you're trying to really get a nice red-green ramp deck, for example, this could get really big on some combat phases. Next up's another card, which is quite new from Aether Revolt with Aether Chaser, so it's a 2-cost 2/1 with First Strike. Again, First Strike is very, very important here, and it's so very good. Plus, you get enters the battlefield with 2 energy counters, and whenever it attacks, you can pay those 2 to create a servo artifact creature token. So again, you're getting yourself 3/2 worth of power for 2 there. The only downside is if you get him out later in the game, you're going to be swinging into a blocker just to be able to get that servo, which isn't necessarily the best trade-off, but again, still useful. Next, we've got Ash Zealot. So it's a 2/2 for 2 red, which is a little bit of a potentially problematic mana cost there, but it's got First Strike and Haste as well. So again, First Strike being really useful. Haste is great swinging in straight away. Plus, whenever a player casts a spell from a graveyard, it deals 3 damage to that player. So again, flashback cost it's going to be doing some work against as well, which is pretty useful. Next up, we've got Keldar Marauders, and it is foil. It's not the best foiling on this one, to be perfectly honest. It's actually quite dark. But so you got yourself a 3/3 for 2 there. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player, and then when it leaves the battlefield, it also does the same thing as well. Plus, it's got Vanishing. So realistically, this is a really good card to have. Just for like a burn deck, for example. So it comes and deals damage, use it as a nice blocker or swinging in for that 1 turn, and then it does some damage on the way out as well. So very good. And then we're going to be moving on to the more spell-centric cards for the 2-drops now. So Abbot of the Carol Keep, again, it's 2/1 for 2 with Prowess. Prowess is always useful, especially if you're trying to play more of that spells-heavy deck. Enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library, and you may be able to play that as well. So it just means you're going to get an extra card to have a look at and potentially play, which is always good. Harsh Mentor has been very, very surprising, and I'm very glad that I've put it into my cube. It's just done so much good work, and it'd be surprising how many cards that actually trigger this ability. So if you haven't tried it out already, definitely worth doing so. So it's a 2/2 for 2, and whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, land on the battlefield that isn't a mana ability, it deals 2 damage to that player, and it's surprising how much damage he actually does do. Definitely recommend this card. And then we've got Young Pyromancer, perfect for that spells matters archetype. Again, it's the cheaper option than the ones we've got in blue, which is like Talrand, for example. So whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to put an elemental creature token onto battlefield. Also works with token strategy as well. Then we've got Eidolon of the Great Revel. Again, this is really nice for a spells deck, for example. So for 2/2, it's for 2. When you cast a spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, it deals 2 damage to that player. So this is going to do some really good work against your opponent. Plus, it's going to be damaging you as well. I'm not going to lie about that, but it's probably going to end up you're going to race your opponent quicker then they're going to be able to kill you. And last of all, we've got Thermo Alchemist. Again, it's for that spells matter archetype, but it's also if you wanted to try to get a little bit more control version of that as well. A 0/3 body for 2 of Defender, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and then whenever you cast the instance of sorcery, you can untap that. So you can potentially get a fair amount of damage done each turn later on in the game with him just by tapping and untapping. So moving into the 3-drops, we're starting off with Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh. So similar to Thermo Alchemist in a sense, where you get yourself a 2/2 for 3, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage. Whenever you cast a red spell, untap it. So if you manage to do 3 or more damage in 1 turn from her, you get to then flip her over into a Planeswalker form, which is a nice bit of protection there. And you can +1 is going to be dealing 2 damage straight to the face of the opponent, which is very, very nice for burning them down. -2 deals 2 damage to target creature. Again, you're not really going to be using that, to be perfectly honest, because your burn spells are far more useful. And -7 it deals 6 damage to each opponent. Each player is dealt damage this way. It gets an emblem at the beginning of their upkeep. They deal 3 damage again and again and again. To be honest, that ultimate isn't that difficult to get to, but the only thing is you may end up have killed your opponent before they even get to that point in time. But Chandra is a very, very nice Planeswalker little creature to have there. Next, you've got Gutter Snipe, so again, very useful for that spells matter archetype. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, deals 2 damage to the opponent on top as well. Always useful. And then we've got Chandra's Phoenix, which is a kind of a little bit of hybrid card here. So aggro in the sense that it's a flying 2/2 with haste for 3. Plus, it's got a bit of recursion going on where whenever an opponent is dealt damage by a red instance or sorcery spell by a red planeswalker you control, or a red planeswalker, you control, you get it back from your graveyard to your hand. So this can just keep coming back and back and back, which is really nice. And then we've got a couple of token generators in red here. So Hanweir Garrison from Eldritch Moon is fantastic. Whenever it attacks, you get to put 2 1/1 creature tokens that are attacking and a 2/3. This is quite nice in the sense that it doesn't always have to attack. It's completely down to you whether you want to or not. But this over time can get serious amount of tokens. Whereas Goblin Rabble Master there, I think it is in foil. We'll try my best to show that. You can see it on the little mana symbols at the bottom of the card anyway. A 2/2 for 3 there, and other goblin creatures you control attack each turn if able. At the beginning of your combat, you get to put a goblin token with haste onto the battlefield, so it's going to be swinging in as well. Plus, it also then gives a little bit of an anthem there, so whenever it attacks, all the rest of the goblins gets +1/+0 for each other attacking goblin, which could be absolutely massive. Next up, we've got a card that I'm trying out from Amonkhet in the form of Combat Celebrant. I do quite like this because it provided some really explosive turns. So it's a 4/1 for 3, which is a little bit fragile, but if you exert it, you get to then have a second combat phase, which is pretty good, especially if you've ended up getting like Goblin Rabble Master or Hamweir Garrison out, because it just means you can get even more tokens out of it, which is pretty nice. Next, we've got Alncrop Crasher. So it's a 3/2 with haste for 3, and you can exert it. If you do that, target creature can't block this turn, which again is a really, really useful ability to really kind of push in to do that extra bit of damage to finish off your opponent. Next up, we've got Manic Vandal, and to be perfectly honest, I keep swapping between this and Torch Fiend quite regularly, so it's just depending on what I've done to my artifact section, for example, will determine which one ends up coming in. But yeah, this is just a 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, and that can always be quite useful. Next up, we've got a more versatile card here in the form of Pian and La. So it's a 2/2 for 3. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 Thopter, so it's 3/3 for 3 in the sense, and 2 bodies. You can pay 1 in a red, target artifact creature gets +1/+0 until the end of turn, so you can keep buffing that up over and over and over again for artifact creatures, for example, or you can just be swinging in with more with that Thopter. Plus, you can pay 1 to sacrifice an artifact, which is probably more likely going to be that Thopter, and target creature can't block this turn, which again is a very useful ability to have. Next up, we've got Sin Prodder, and I really do like this card. It's quite entertaining, and it can actually be surprising how much damage it ends up doing to your opponent, plus a card draw for your sense as well. So it's a 3/2 with Menace for 3. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to reveal the top card of your library. Your opponent can choose whether to put it into the graveyard or not, or put it into your hand, for example. If a player does put it into the graveyard, it deals damage equal to that card's voted mana cost, otherwise it goes to your hand, so you get yourself an extra card draw if they say no, keep it. Yes, it means that if you end up drawing a land with this, the opponent's going to go, yeah, it's going to go straight in the graveyard, not a problem, but you still then get your card draw from your turn phase as well, so again, it's a pretty useful card. And then it's a more of a fun card here in the form of Volatile Chimera. So it's a 3/2 for 3. Before you shuffle your deck at the start of the game, you can reveal this card and exile 3 or more creatures you drafted that aren't in your deck. So you could be playing a red burn style deck, and you could just have like Ulamog, Sun Titan, and something else ridiculous to the side. And you can pay 1 in a red, choose a card at random you've exiled, and it becomes a copy of that. So you could suddenly have this on the board and suddenly turns to Ulamog, and your opponent's just going, what the... So, it can be really, really strong, but again, it depends on what you've drafted. But if you've managed to pick this up quite early in your draft, I have no issues at all, picking up some really, really strong creatures that just aren't even remotely usable in red, but because of this guy, they will be. So moving on into the 4-drops, we're going to start off with Hellrider. Again, it's just a really good card for wide board presence, aggro-centric deck for red. It could work really nicely in red-white tokens as well. 3/3 with haste for 4, and whenever a creature you control attacks, it deals 1 damage to the defending player, and that can ramp up quite considerably depending on the size of your board presence. Next up, we've got Hazoret the Fervent. So for 4 costs, it's a 5/4 with indestructible and haste. It can't attack or block unless you have 1 or fewer cards in hand, which, to be perfectly honest, shouldn't be too difficult with red. Slinging a load of spells, discarding cards, and putting cheap creatures out. You can then also help get him to be able to attack by paying 2 in a red, discarding a card, and deal 2 damage to each opponent. So again, you can get him online quite quickly, and he is very good. Next up, we've got Flametongue Kavu. So for 3 in a red, you've got yourself a 4/2, and when it enters the battlefield, it does 4 damage to target creature. Definitely worth abusing that ETB trigger. So next up we've got Beetleback Chief. So for 2 and 2 red, you've got yourself a 2/2, and it enters the battlefield to put 2/1/1 red goblin creature tokens on the battlefield. Works really nicely for that token strategy. Plus it works out quite nicely with, say, Siege Gang Commander and Goblin Rabble Master as well to buff all of those up. And, you know, flickering that's not going to be an issue as well. Next up we've got Peering Kieran Nalath. This again is a foil. Just about see that. So for 2 and 2 red, you got yourself a 2/2, but it enters the battlefield with 2/1/1 colour stop to artifact creature tokens as well. So 4 power for 4. You can then pay 2 and a red to sacrifice an artifact, and it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So, you know, you can just have a little bit of extra burn that your opponent may end up forgetting about as well, so that's quite nice. And last of all, we've got a nice little bit of land destruction here in the form of Avalanche Riders. So it's a 2/2 with haste for 4, and it enters the battlefield, destroy target land, plus you're going to be swinging in for a bit of 2 damage as well on top, so nice little card to have there. So moving on into the 5 drops, and like I said a little tiny bit earlier, Siege Gun Commander had to be here. I mean, this is just so good for tokens in red. So it's a 2/2 for 5, but it enters the battlefield, you get 3/1/1 red goblin creature tokens. You can pay 1 red to sacrifice a goblin, and it deals 2 damage to the target creature or player. So again, you can just fling goblins to deal damage to their face over and over and over again, so that's really nice. Or you can go wide with this and the other goblins as well to really do some significant damage. Next up we've got the Zealous Conscripts, and this is just a really good card by itself. I do need to pick up Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin as well, because I would just like to have those combo style elements in the cube, but to be perfectly honest, this can just do some serious work by itself. So I mean, it's a 3/3 with haste for 5, but when it enters the battlefield, you gain control of target permanent until the end of turn. That could be anything. That could be a Planeswalker just about ready to ultimate. That could be a really useful piece of artifact, so you can tie something down or ramp up with something else, or one of their biggest creatures, and you know, it gains haste and you can swing in and do some serious damage. So I do like the versatility of that. Next up we've got Goblin Dark Dwellers. Again, this is a 4, I think you can just about see that there. I really do like this promo. It's one of the new cards that I picked up for my cube. It's a 4/4 for 5 with Menace, but when it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant or sorcery with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So again, it's a nice top end for either a burn deck or a Spells Matter deck for sure. Just being able to put this out into play, deal a little bit of extra damage, plus then you've got yourself a 4/4 body with Menace on top as well, so that's nice. And speaking of him earlier, we've got Glorybringer again. This is a foil version of him, and I'm very glad my partner opened up the foil one. She just gets all the luck with, you know, opening up the really nice cards. Again, like I said earlier on, he's basically Sarkhan. That's the best way of describing him without having an ultimate. So it's a 4/4 flying haste dragon for 5. You can exert it as it attacks, and it deals 4 damage to target non-dragon creature and opponent controls. You know, that's fantastic. You can kill off a creature if you need to. Plus, if you have ways to untap it, you can just keep exerting it over and over and over again, which is really nice. So that's where I think it might have the slight advantage over Sarkhan, but you know, Sarkhan is a Planeswalker and harder to deal with, so there is that side of it as well. But at this moment in time, at the size of 720, I have no issues having both of them in there, and I really do like Glorybringer. So moving on to the 6 drops, and we're going to start off with Inferno Titan. This is actually a foil, not that you can tell. So it's a 6/6 for 6, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage, divided as you choose between 1 or 2 or 3 target creatures and or players. So you'd be doing 3 damage straight to the dome every single time, or it can kill off a blocker potentially every single time it attacks. Plus you can pay 1 red as many times as you like, and it gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. So you know, you could really swing in and do some significant damage with that. Next up we've got Combustible Gear Hulk, and to be honest, I do like the Gear Hulks, and this one's done some really good work as well. So 6/6 for 6 with First Strike, but when it enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If they don't, you get to put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then it deals damage to that player equal to the converted mana cost of those cards. So over the course of the game, those 3 cards could be quite a fair bit of damage on top, plus a First Strike 6/6 is always useful. Great Tinker target or anything along those lines as well. It's just really nice to have. And last of all, again, for the Spells Matter or any kind of spell slinging kind of deck we've got going on here. We've got Charmbreaker Devils. So for 5 and a red, it's a 4/4. But at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to return a target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard at random from your graveyard to your hand. So you could end up getting something back every single turn, which is great. Plus, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +4/+0 until the end of turn as well. So it becomes a massive great beater on top. So again, that is always useful, but I really do like it for getting you back a spell every single upkeep. So moving on into the spells now, and I've made a lot of changes to my instants and sorceries within red for definite, because what I had originally just wasn't good enough, and I think the changes have made quite a big difference. So to start off with, Burst Lightning, 2 damage for 1, or it can be 4 damage if you use the kicker as well. So again, useful later on if you've got excess mana. Lightning Bolt, we've got ourselves a foil version here. 3 damage to target creature for 1, always great. Next up we've got Magma Jet, which again is another foil. So for 2, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player and scry 2. Again, you can sort it out your next plays. Next up we've got Ancient Grudge, and to be perfectly honest, the new card that's just been spoiled for Hour of Devastation, and the name it just eludes me, may end up replacing this card for sure. It just looks very, very good, but Ancient Grudge is in here for destroying target artifacts. Next we've got Lightning Strike, so 3 damage to target creature or player for 2 cost there. Searing Spear, again, is exactly the same thing, but we've got a foil there as well. Incinerate does pretty much the same thing as previous cards, except if you do damage to a creature, it can't be regenerated. So again, always useful there. Next, we've got Smash to Smithereens. So for 1 red, destroy target artifact, and does 3 damage to the target's controller as well. So this one will probably end up staying in just because it does damage to the controller on top. Next, we've got Chaos Warp. So the owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library and then reveals the top card of the library. If it's a permanent, it puts it onto the battlefield. So this can be used potentially for yourself, or it just gets rid of a bigger threat the opponent has, and they potentially could get something a lot weaker out. They could even potentially even get the same card out, for example, but more likely won't. Next, we've got Char. So again, we're going to try and show the foiling off there. Yeah, just about. 3 cost, deals 4 damage to target creature or player and 2 damage to you, and you're not going to mind that if you're trying to race your opponent down in a burn deck. Next, we've got Glorious End. I've actually quite enjoyed this. So it definitely does have its moments. So for 2 and a red, you end the turn at that point in time. So it's really, really nice when your opponent has just overextended, swung in with everything, thinking they've got the win. Everything is tapped out. You throw this down, ends the turn at instant speed, and at the beginning of your next end step, you lose the game. So if you can then, they've completely tapped out, they can't do anything to you, and you can swing in for the win. That actually is fantastic. And this has actually won a fair few games so far already, so I've been very impressed with that. Next, we've got Fire Blast. Again, it is another foil. Just about see that. So you may sacrifice 2 mountains rather than pay its cost, and it deals 4 damage to target creature or player. And later on in the game, when you're getting to the point where you can really end your opponent, no issues in sacrificing 2 mountains. And last up, we've got Comet Storm. So it's just an X cost and 2 red. Choose target creature or player, then choose another target for each time it's been kicked, so you can pay 1 to kick it. Deals X damage to each of them, so more than likely you're just going to be using this to smash your opponents down, but you can just pay 1 and it may end up killing a couple of creatures on top as well, so per once, that's always useful. So moving on into the sorceries, and like I said earlier, there's been loads of changes here. So starting off, we've got Magmatic Insight. Additional cost, discard a land, pay 1, draw 2 cards. I'm not going to have an issue doing that. Then we've got Chain Lightning, 3 damage to target creature or player, and they can rebound it if they wanted to with 2 red, but that's highly unlikely. Gamble, I opened up fairly recently. It's just it's amusing. It probably shouldn't be in here and it probably shouldn't stay, but I just like it because it's amusing, because it's a good, nice little tutor for red. The only issue is, discarding a card at random, you could end up losing the card that you've just picked up. So it's been some amusing times been played there where, my friend's got one's going to get like his finisher, then they end up discarding it into the graveyard, and he wasn't very happy about that, but it's quite funny when it happens to someone else but not to you. Next we've got Firebolt, 2 damage to target creature or player, plus it's got flashback on top as well. Flashback's quite useful there in the sense that if you've got excess mana later on in the game, your opponent may end up forgetting about it. Flame Slash, just 4 damage to target creature for 1. Faithless Looting is fantastic, so Drawing 2 cards, discarding 2 cards for 1 is good, and then you've also got the flashback ability of that as well. Dragon Fodder, 2. I should probably put this in the creature section actually. 2 red goblins for 2. Next up, we've got Tormenting Voice. I think that's a foil. Trying my best to show it. Yeah. So additional cost to you discard 1 card, draw 2 cards for 2. Again, it's a slightly easier on the eye version of Faithless Looting there, purely down to the fact you're only discarding 1 card rather than 2. Incendiary Flow from Eldritch Moon is still here, so 2 cost, deals 3 damage to target creature or player. If a creature would be dealt damage this way, it'd be exiled instead, so exile's quite handy to have there, especially with regenerating or recurring creatures. Mizium Mortars is next. So for 2, it deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control, or you can overload it and it turns into a board wipe. Arc Trail's next. 2 cost, deals 2 damage to target creature or player and 1 damage to another creature or player, so you can potentially get a nice little 2-for-1 going on there. Sweltering Suns is a card I've been very impressed with, and is actually doing quite a good amount of work in Standard at the moment. So for 3 costs, it deals 3 damage to each creature, plus it's got the cycling cost on as well, so you can discard it, pay 3, discard it, and draw a card if you don't actually need that, so that's useful to have. Rift Bolt, to be perfectly honest, you're never going to pay 3 for that, unless you've got loads of excess mana and draw it later on in the game, but you can spend it for 1 mana, and you get yourself 3 damage to the face. Karazov's Expertise I've been very impressed with. I always like to have cards which you can take over opponents' creatures. This one can do it with vehicles as well, and using it for yourself, so you can steal a Smuggler's Copter, for example, and get a bit of a loot ability going on. Plus, it means you can also cast a card and convert a mana cost 2 or less from your hand without doing it. So you can steal a card, put a creature down, or even just steal a card and a nice little burn spell on the top. So that's always nice to have. Next up, we've got Collective Defiance. Again, this is a foil. Just about see that. So for 1 and 2 red with an escalate cost of 1, target player discards all the cards in his or her hand and then draws that many cards. Refilling your hand if your hand's not very good is always useful. 4 damage to target creature and 3 damage to target opponent. To be perfectly honest, restocking your hand and dealing 3 damage to target opponent is always quite good to have. Next up, we've got Arc Trail. So 3 cost, you get to deal 3 damage, provided you choose between 1, 2, or 3 creatures or players. So again, it's handy. We can potentially get yourself a 2-for-1 going on there. Molten Rain, destroy target land. If that land was non-basic, it deals 2 damage as well. A nice little bit of land destruction. Not everybody's a fan of land destruction from what I've been reading in the comments, but it does help. In my cube, I'm trying to support a little bit of wildfire going on, so it does help with that. Insults Injury is a new card from Amonkhet, one of those split ones. Again, I don't like the look of them myself personally, but some of them are actually fairly good. So for 3 costs, damage can't be prevented this turn. If a source you control will deal damage this turn, it deals double that instead. So that's always nice. So fog effects won't work if you're ever going to be doing anything along those lines, or and dealing everything doing double damage is fantastic. So you can play this early on and then just start slinging some spells that do twice the amount of damage is fantastic. Plus, when it goes into your graveyard with the aftermath cost there, so for 3, it deals 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. So potentially a nice little 2-for-1 in your graveyard as well, and I just like the extra value you're getting there. Next up, we've got Exquisite Firecraft. This is really fantastic for your spells, your heavy style decks, purely down to the fact that Spell Mastery will more than likely be procced. So for 1 and 2 red, it deals 4 damage to target creature or player, and it can't be countered with Spell Mastery if there are 2 or more instant sorcery cards, and there more than likely will be in your graveyard by this point in time. So I like that because it can't be countered. Next up, we've got the 2 Wildfire cards going on there, so Wildfire itself and Burning of Zine. Again, I'm trying to support the archetype. I need to probably put a few more mana rocks in than what I've got already, but I'd like to be able to support that properly. Next up's another card that I've actually really liked from Aether Revolt in Release the Gremlins. So artifact removal can potentially be a big thing within cubes. This is nice because you get to destroy target artifacts and then create goblins on top, so you could potentially get rid of a load of their opponent's biggest threats. Or if you're playing a powered cube, not that I've got, mine's not powered by any stretch of the imagination, but if you are, you can get rid of some of the Moxes or any of the other things like Soul Ring, for example, and you're getting yourself some creatures on top, which is always fun. Then you've got a board wipe going on here with Rolling Earthquake, so it deals X damage to each creature without horsemanship and each player. To be perfectly honest, I don't think I've got any creatures whatsoever in the cube with horsemanship. So yeah, it's going to deal X damage to each creature and player. And that's a nice finisher to have within a burn deck. And last of all, we've got Bonfire of the Damned. Opened this up in Modern Masters 2017. It deals X damage to target player and each creature he or she controls, which is great. Plus the miracle cost on top as well is always very useful to have. But potentially this could be a lot of damage. So last of all, moving into the enchantments, and there's only 3. First of all, we've got Molten Vortex. So you pay 1 mana for this enchantment. You can pay 1, discard a land card. It deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So again, later on in the game, this potentially can be a fair amount of damage going on, especially if you've got excess lands. Next up, we've got, you have to have this in red. You just have to with Sulfuric Vortex here. So for 1 and 2 red, and any red aggro burn or whatever deck you're trying to burn, you get your opponent down as quickly as possible. This is the card you want to have, potentially just first pickable but over everything else. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, it deals 2 damage to that player. If that player would gain life, they gain none instead. And to be perfectly honest, you know, you're going to be able to outrace your opponent faster than they are going to be outrace you, and this just puts a nice clock on the game there. And last of all, we've got Hammer of Perforus. So for 1 and 2 red, creatures you control have haste. You can then pay 2 and a red, sacrifice a land, and put a 3/3 colourless Golem Enchantment artifact creature token onto the battlefield. Again, it's fairly useful, but to be perfectly honest, I'd rather have the God card, and that's what I would want to upgrade this to. I just think the God is so much better, because you're going to be doing damage whenever creatures come into play, plus giving haste as well, and plus its ability on top as well. So this will probably be swapped out as soon as I can get my hands on that God. So there we have all of the red cards in my cube. Now, like I said earlier, the changes that these cards have made from your suggestions is like night and day. It's playing so much better, and I can't thank you all enough for that. Now, if you've missed any of the previous episodes where we've gone through white, blue and black cards, for example, there will be a link in the description below, plus a card on the screen now if you wanted to check out any of the other ones. In the future videos, we're going to be going through the rest of my cube, so if there are specific colours that you're waiting for, hold tight. Over the next week or so, there will be all of the videos will be coming out. I'm releasing one every single weekday, so definitely stay tuned for all of those. And thank you again so much to everybody that's putting comments down in the comments section for these videos that have gone past already, because it's actually really helping me again to improve my cube. There, I'm getting some great feedback telling me how much the cube is improved and it's playing so much better, but these are cards that could really help improve it to take it to another level. So again, thank you so much for all of your input. It's really appreciated. I would just like to take this moment to thank my Patreons of the channel. I can't thank you enough for the help and support that you're giving me. If you'd like to do the same, head over to patreon.com/lifebegins@20, and there'll be a link in the description below for that as well, where there are plenty of rewards to choose from. With your support, we can really push to make this channel even better. Be sure to check out our sponsor, 5colorcombo.com, for a great range of Magic the Gathering accessories with stunning artwork, plus a great app to draft and create decks on the fly. Use the referral code LifeBegins20 for 5% off. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for new videos every Tuesday and Friday. With your support, we can really help this channel to grow. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.